This conference will now be recorded.
You guys are all familiar with Devon. He's back and he has another presentation to give us today. After we finish this presentation, we'll just have about 10-15 minutes for another assignment that I'm going to give you, and then you're going to be done for the day. So take it away, Devon.
Okay, can everybody see my screen? All right. So today we're going to talk about active reading strategies and effective note-taking. So, reading a textbook, and I need to find a way to minimize this. There we go. Okay, so reading a textbook or an academic writing assignment is different than reading a novel. If you're reading something for pleasure, it's obviously different. If you have like an assignment for a class, it's not necessarily something you're going to look forward to. So, you know, the way that you absorb that information, the way that you interact with it is going to be different. And so you might not comprehend it as well. You might not be able to kind of keep up with it in the same way you would if you were reading a fiction book or anything like that. So some reasons why you might have difficulty reading a textbook. You find the textbooks boring, or you flat out don't like to read. So I know that there are some people in English classes right now, and there's some people in, you know, more STEM kind of classes. But I don't know, who here would say that they just don't like to read?
I actually like to read.
You do like to read?
Yeah.
Do you like reading your textbooks?
No, preferably books.
Okay, why don't you like reading your textbooks?
Because it's like it talks about stuff I'm not interested in.
Okay.
How about the rest of you? You can either respond by unmuting or you can put it in the chat.
I also like to read, but I find textbooks I have trouble focusing on them, I guess. For the same reasons, they're just, maybe it's not something I chose to read, it's something I was assigned to read. So it's a little difficult.
Okay.
Bailey responded that it depends on the thing. She can't sit down and read a novel in full anymore, but she'll crank out a textbook as needed. It feels different because she has trouble motivating herself internally.
Okay. All right. So another one of the reasons for not liking to read your textbook or reading your textbook, coming away and thinking, I just read a whole chapter and I have no clue what was in any of it, is what some of you guys already said, is that you can't concentrate. You know, that thing where you sit down and you think you've absorbed the information, but really you just kind of stared at words for 20 minutes, or you just have like the same song stuck in your head, and that's all you can think about. I fall asleep when I read. That's another big problem that people have. I read for hours, but I don't understand what I have read. Again, that's the, you know, sitting down, staring at your textbook and either like reading a few pages, coming away and thinking, what on earth did I just read? I can't tell you a single syllable that was in that textbook. Or just sitting down, staring at one paragraph and trying to make sense of it. So some strategies for overcoming these barriers: create positive affirmations about reading, saying, I enjoy reading books and articles of all kinds. That can be difficult when the class subject is not, first of all, it's not something that you know very much about yet, or if it's something that is really not your forte. Maybe it's an elective that's required for your major, or one of the core classes that you have to take, but you're really not excited about it. So when you kind of try to view it in a more positive light, rather than, I don't like reading or I hate reading textbooks, thinking about it as, I like learning new things, or I'm doing this to better understand what's happening in class, or, I want to learn better ways how to study, something like that. Just thinking about it as something that you are doing to better yourself, anything like that. That's a better way of looking at it than just saying, I hate that I have to do this, this sucks, anything like that. Oops. And number 2 would be create a study location free from distractions. This is a big one. Having your phone near you, big distraction. Having music playing. I know some people think that they can study with music. If that's how you are, more power to you. But I think you really need to think about whether the music that you play is actually helping you, or if you have to split your attention to really focus on one or the other, because most people aren't as good at multitasking as they think they are. So really having a study location that is minimal is probably a better option. A strategy for overcoming the problem of falling asleep when you're reading is don't read at night in your comfy bed, but rather at a well-lit desk or table. Make time to read in the morning instead. So I think that not reading in bed is a very important one. Your bed should be the place where you sleep. That's what that's like the association that your brain makes with it. That's where you lay down at night and go to bed. So when you prop up your textbook in bed, you're going to get tired. So instead of, setting up camp to do your studying from your bedroom, if you have another place in your house, or if you have the opportunity to go to a library, that would probably help overcoming that, thing of feeling like you're falling asleep when you're reading. If you're falling asleep or, just unable to pay attention to the task at hand, regardless of how tired you are, regardless of your environment, other ways of kind of keeping yourself on task and keeping yourself alert are to break the assignment down into smaller chunks. If you find that you can, keep focused for 3 paragraphs or so, just read for 3 paragraphs, take some notes, and then do something to focus yourself and go back to reading. If that's what it takes, do that. Because if your strategy is to just sit and read straight through 15 pages of inorganic chemistry, I think a lot of people are going to fall asleep. It can get pretty monotonous. Oops. Okay. And this goes back to what I was saying, divide your reading into smaller readable chunks and take breaks. That helps increase your comprehension and reduce your reading time. The average person's attention span really caps out around 20 minutes. So if you are sitting down at your desk, wherever you're studying, and trying to read for half an hour straight, the chances are after about 20 minutes, your ability to absorb that information, to truly comprehend it and dedicate it to your memory, that starts falling off. So that goes back to the importance of taking breaks. If you guys remember that Pomodoro timer that I talked about last week, that uses that system of working for 20 minutes, then taking a break, going back and working for 20 minutes, because that's about when your attention span has hit its limit. Okay. Here are some active reading strategies. Okay, so implementing these strategies can help you prepare for writing about what you've read. So do a pre-read. Okay, so in your pre-read, take a look at the chapter summary, the abstract, class notes, or online reviews to provide insight into what's being covered. The chapter titles and objectives, focus questions, text headings, charts, graphs, illustrations, previews, and summaries will really help you get the big picture of what that chapter will be about. Every textbook is different, but most of them will have usually a table of contents about what that chapter, the subheadings of that chapter will be about. They'll have, some sections will be in bold. Might have bolded keywords. There will be, shaded boxes where there's anecdotes or separate information that is maybe not necessarily related to the exact topic at hand, but it might be like a story to help you understand what is being talked about. So those are all little things that break up the reading and say, hey, this part is important. When you do this pre-read, and you can just skim through the chapter at first, and you notice these bolded words or keywords, and you don't know what they mean, on Cengage, I think you can hover over them and it will give you the definitions of them. You can, just hover over the definitions, read it, make a mental note of it, you can write them down. But, just getting that information about what you're going to read will help you, internalize everything. Getting those definitions it'll make everything, a bit easier to comprehend when you do the, the comprehensive read through. Then you're going to mark up the text. So I typically advise using a pencil instead of a highlighter. When you have a highlighter, it's really easy to, for things to get out of hand and for you to end up highlighting everything that you think is important, and suddenly you have just an entire yellow sheet of paper. So using a pencil, I think, is typically the better way to go. You can erase things, you can, just make light notes, you can circle things lightly. You can scratch notes in the margins of your page. If you're using, printed copies, like printed out pages of your textbook. If you're on Cengage, you do have the option of making notes within the textbook. There's a highlight option. I believe you can do different colors. I'm not super familiar with all the ins and outs of Cengage, but I do know there's different options for you to make notes in Cengage. And then I would say, if you do find using a highlighter helpful, I would suggest using that your second read through. If you underline something with your pencil, knowing that this is important, I need to remember this, I would say then when you're reading it through the second time, that's when you use the highlighter to make sure that your eyes are drawn back to that information when you are looking over your notes, when you're studying later. And everybody has a different system of marking up papers, like underlining, circling, making brackets. I know for me, with my notes, they're almost incomprehensible for me. Like parentheses means something completely different than brackets. And that's, it's kind of just a system just to me. So I have come up with something that I understand. I can go back and look at my notes from a year ago and know, okay, I put this squiggle here because it means this. And, it doesn't necessarily have to, you don't necessarily have to put, full out notes. You can use abbreviations, whatever makes sense to you. Post-it notes, that's another thing, a good thing to have a thought about something. If you, just want to make like a mental note to go back and look more into a subject, stick the post-it note there. Okay. So again, we're taking notes while you're reading. This comes back to when you're doing your read through, if you come across words that you don't understand, first try to put it in context. Read the word in the context of the passage, of the sentence, of the paragraph, whatever it's in, and see if it makes sense to you that way. If not, look it up. It will make things a whole lot easier if you get the definition, and especially if you write the definition, either like in the right above the line. If you add a comment on Cengage, having that definition, and then going back and reading it now that you know the context that word should be used in will help a lot. Read and mark main ideas and supporting details. So when you're reading something, like if your professor said, some kind of like repeated some kind of term in class a couple times, and you notice it in your reading when you're going through your textbook, underline that, see what the textbook has to say about that. And that, look more into the importance of that, and try to focus on the how it relates to what you're studying. And you can do a 5-minute reflective writing. So this is when you're finished reading the like a chapter of your textbook, a couple pages, however much it is, just grab a piece of paper, do it on Microsoft Word, whatever, just write whatever your thoughts are, It does not have to be formal. It does not have to be, in English essay style. You don't need a thesis, nothing like that. Just write whatever you're thinking. For me, I tend to do this while I'm reading things. I keep a notebook next to me whenever I'm reading anything to write down my thoughts as I'm having them. So I'm not just focusing on whatever I'm thinking. I can get it out of my head, write it down. Okay, it's there. If I forget about it, that's fine. It's written down. So doing this 5-minute reflective reading, write down whatever you're thinking, even if it's not relevant to the chapter, just write it down. This really helps with trying to make sense of what you just read. And when you go back to these notes that you just took, especially since they'll be in your own words, it will help you recall what was in that chapter. And then this quotation bank thing, if you have certain parts of if you put brackets around certain sentences or anything like that, you can, rewrite those in your notebook or retype them, anything like that. If you think that, oh, that's important, I'd want to remember that. Okay. So that will happen on your, pre-read and then your first read through, but you're not going to stop there. You want to read it over and over and over again, because you will pick up on new things that maybe didn't make as much sense to you the first time around. After you have the entire context of the chapter, when you read through the whole thing again, it might make a lot more sense. You might pick up on, a different pattern. You might have new questions, anything like that. So that's why you want to, reread these things. You might want to go back to specific sections that you think you could analyze from a different perspective, anything like that. Okay. So this is just kind of a fun thing. Does anybody want to try reading this out loud?
I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh? Yeah, I was always taught spelling was important.
That's just a fun thing included, because it is kind of weird how you know after seeing how jumbled this all is and then reading back through it, you can pick up on it better the second time around, third time around, and just how weird it is that our brains can do that. Okay, so some additional reading tips. Ensure that your study and Lisa asks, who was able to read it?
It's funny what our brain will allow us to see when we can read like that, isn't it? Okay, you can go on, Devin. I just wanted to see who was able to read it and who wasn't.
Some additional reading tips. Ensure your study and reading area is conducive, free from distractions. If you're the type of person who can listen to music while you study, try listening to it at a low volume to filter out other sounds. I know for me, I got really into lo-fi over the past, year and a half or so. If you go on YouTube and search music to study to, you'll see, just a bunch of different live playlists come up with, usually it's just like this animation of a girl sitting with a cat in her window. And it's just like this very nice, usually completely instrumental, like chill techno music that I put in the background when I study. Yeah, lo-fi beats. And I find that helps me because, there's very rarely any, voices that interrupt. When it is, it's kind of, it's not somebody really singing. And that's something that I find does not like distract me while I am studying. Monitor your comprehension, look up unfamiliar words or concepts, concentrate on reading faster. Experiment that found students improve speed by 25 to 50% by deciding to read faster. So another way that you can try to, improve your reading speed is by, when you're taking a look at whatever you're about to read, is skimming through it first. Not necessarily like turning the page every second or two, but, doing a quick read, reading like every other line and getting an idea of what you're about to read. Because then when you go back through it the second time, you already have that context, you have the general pattern of what's going to come up, you already know what to expect. So when you do your more comprehensive read, it might not take you as long. And then Cengage does have a feature where you can have the textbook read aloud to you. I'm not sure if you can change the voice options or anything like that. Can you change the way that it sounds?
I'm not sure if you can change that with the Cengage stuff, but I do know that in the library and the databases, you can also have it read articles to you, and you can change the voices on that.
There's also a couple different browser extensions that you can get where you just add them to Chrome or whatever you use, and you just have to click a button and it will read out loud the page that you're on. If you highlight text and you want it to read out just specifically what you highlight, it can do that. Google Docs and Microsoft Word have that feature as well. So if you are, an auditory learner, that might be, a thing to consider is having, is using those features. Consider creating a vocabulary list in a journal. And spelling is important. If you are, if you're handwriting notes, I say handwriting because if you're typing your notes, spell check will probably correct you. But if you're handwriting your notes and you're, misspelling the same word over and over and over again, you're not going to, teach yourself the correct spelling of whatever it is, and you're going to internalize the incorrect spelling. So that's why spelling is important. Okay, so now more onto note taking. And so why do we take notes? It's to understand and remember, outline important points, and clarify new ideas. So when you are, here are some things to do when you are taking notes. Before class, you should have your homework assignments done. Review your notes from the previous class. Be prepared. Bring your materials such as a textbook, your notebook, pens, pencils, anything like that. If you're with your online class, have the tabs open that you need to reference, have whatever you need in front of you to engage with whatever you're about to go over. Sit front and center and limit distractions. So having that conducive study environment. During class, ask questions and participate in discussions. Clarify confusing material and encourage memory association. So when you do kind of interact with whatever is going on, even if you don't necessarily have, a lot of questions or can't really think of a specific question to ask, when you are interacting with the material and you're getting it back and forth, that's going to help you internalize the content. It's going to help you be able to recall that later, and it's going to stick better in your memory. Highlight or underline important information. Listen and look for verbal and nonverbal cues. So repeated words or phrases, transition words and phrases like the main point is, most importantly, to summarize. So you can do this, in class and then with your textbook. So if a teacher is repeating the same, phrase in class, like the same concept over and over again, it might be something you want to, write in your notebook, put a star next to it, and, kind of look more into that concept or study and focus on whatever has been, kind of enunciated in that class. And then with nonverbal, if your textbooks will typically have a better structure for you to see what is the main idea, what is the important part. It has those bolded headings, it has the highlighted keywords, it has the shaded blocked out areas. So those are the parts that you might want to, take into consideration, look at and see, okay, so this looks different from the rest of the text. Why? Why is this information important? How does it relate to everything else? Does this relate to what we're going over in the class right now? And, how is it important to me? And anticipate your professor's lecture style. This one can get tricky because, every professor has a different lecture style. It can be very nuanced. It can be, the professor can just come out on day one and say, this is how I do things. Some can, change things up a little bit, but recognizing the patterns in your class can help you kind of anticipate what's next. After class, review your notes for about 10 minutes, right after class. Going over everything you had just done, from start to finish is really going to help you lock that in your memory. It's going to, solidify that information, and it will help you recognize what, if there was anything in the class that you went over that you don't understand still, if you realize you need to focus more on, you make note of that. Make sure that you understand your notes. Edit when necessary for messy handwriting and fill in missing information. So this is where you need to kind of find your note-taking style, and we'll go over that in just a minute. If you are, just trying to write as fast as you can to to write down every single word your professor is saying, there might be a better way for you to take down your notes, because you might come out with something that is just incomprehensible. And then if you're the type of person who likes digital copies of something, who thinks that, retyping something helps you remember, typing your notes that you just took in class is also going to help you help them stick in your memory. And if you're somewhere without your notebook and you want to study, you can pull them up on your phone, you can pull them up on your computer, anything like that. Okay. So another thing you can do with your notes is to create an outline. Here is an example of an outline. And so this is a pretty typical outline style. You can actually use this format on Google Docs or Microsoft Word, or I'm sure it's on Pages if you want to type up your notes. But you can use this kind of structure, having the the title be the main idea, what these notes are about, what is the most important thing here. You have the introduction about what you're going to be talking about, and then you have like the one, and then you have A, B. So the further you get, the more it gets broken down into those subtopics. Always use a separate notebook for each of your courses. Include the date and topic on the first page for easier access and reference. Don't keep one notebook for all of your classes. It's not, it might be convenient for not having to carry around a whole bunch of different things or having to find a whole bunch of different notebooks at once, but it's not the best way to stay organized. Okay. So here's another way that you can create an outline. Or I'm going to actually. Okay. So has anybody heard of the Cornell method of note-taking? Okay, Bailey says yes. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody use the Cornell method? Okay, so Bailey said we were made to use it for a year, but I use an altered version of it, usually only with keywords. It's like a mix of an outline and Cornell. Do you want to explain that more, Bailey?
So I usually use either a a big grouping term at the top like you would in an outline, or I put it on the side in the indent. And I usually put keywords on the little, I believe it is called an indent. And then I put the definitions on the side. Like the Cornell method is basically like the outline method, but with keywords on the side. So either I will use keywords or I won't. So, but I guess that's the only way to explain it.
Okay. Do you handwrite your notes or do you type them?
Yes. I usually handwrite them. If I really feel the need to have them digitally, I will have them digitally, but I find it a lot more helpful if I do read several times over and write my notes.
Okay. So Amanda, you said, I don't think so. I'm not sure what that was in reply to, but do you want to talk a little bit about the way that you take notes?
I don't really have an organized way of taking notes. I kind of just highlight things, like I'll make copies of something and highlight it or print it out and kind of add notes to it, mostly like vocab stuff, but I've never used this method before, I don't think.
Does anybody else want to talk about the way that they take notes, their methods? Okay. So the Cornell method of note-taking uses this keywords section. You divide your paper either with lines or just keeping things organized. So you have this column on the left-hand side where you have your keywords, where you would write, you know, whatever you have, and then the, you know, the definitions. Then on the right-hand side of that column, you would have your notes with the, you know, whatever you went over in the lecture, you know, shorthands of the main ideas from whatever you went over, whether it was a video, PowerPoint, anything like that. And then at the bottom is where you would write a short summary of what you went over after class. Here is another method of note-taking. Does anybody use a mind map?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Like how I use it, or
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I use it exactly like this, but in a way, I just go use Google in a way, kind of, to help me out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Does your method change depending on what class you're taking notes for?
No.
Okay, so what do you find most helpful about this method?
Just a, I don't know how to explain it. Never mind. Never mind.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody else use a mind map? So the mapping method of taking notes would be, it's pretty individual. These are just 2 examples. You can do it any way you like. You can do it digitally. You can do it in your notes. So you would have, typically you would have a title, and then in the middle, you would have the central idea, and then these lines branching out from the main idea, further breaking down that, you know, the big subject. So we have green energy is the title, 5 types, it's breaking down the 5 types of green energy, and under the, you know, subtitles, it gives a, you know, short little definition of what that type of energy is. And you know, on the example on the left, it then has other definitions lower. It seems to have footnotes. The one on the right is a little bit more, I guess, chaotic with, you know, this, the central topic is mind map notes. And the branches are the mind map with why and what, and branching out to see examples, read articles, whole brain, you have converting, keywords, paragraph structure, Cornell method. And so the way that the number of branches that you can have from these could, you know, be infinite. Realistically, they likely won't. Subjects that you would use a mind map for would likely be to break down concepts like, you know, the example on the left of green energy, and that won't necessarily be something that that you would write a it wouldn't necessarily be the way that you outline your, you know, 8-page research paper or something like that, because it might be a little bit complicated. But if that's the way that you tend to organize your information, more power to you. Okay, so are you a good note taker? So pre-lecture, or, you know, before class, do you read the assigned material, review notes from the previous class, and complete any assignments? During the lecture, use appropriate heading, highlighted, underline important information, asked questions, and then after class, did you review for 10 minutes, clarify or read confusing notes? Do we want to take the time to, you know, write down our answers and tally up? Lisa or Tiffany or Rose?
Okay, everybody put your yeses or nos to these questions into the chat. So type in for pre-lecture, yes or no. Do you read the assigned material before your lecture? Type in either yes or no.
Yes. Sorry.
Now you're just messing with my head. I'm recording all this. And Bailey, of course, makes my life difficult. It actually depends. It's yes or no, Bailey.
don't have any.
I
She
can't
got
count them, maybe. Okay, for the first question, so there were only 2 yeses, 3 nos, and a mysterious Bailey. All right, so next, do you review notes from previous class prior to getting to class? Yes or no? Isaiah with a hard nope. All right. So for this one, there were 3 yeses and 3 nos.
Yeah, it's half and half.
Have you completed any assignments prior to going to class? I hope you have, but let's see. All right, Greg, I need to know your answer to that one. And Amanda, did you answer the second one or the third one, completing your assignments prior to going to class? All right. Good. Everybody said yes. That is the goal, right? So now, while you're sitting in class, which is during lecture, do you use appropriate headings in your notes? Yes or no?
No.
And that is, putting the date of the class and what the class was about that day at the top of your notes page.
Oh, yeah, I do.
And then give it to him, so it'll show up maybe online. But if it's done right away, so maybe not.
Bailey, I can't even right now. Greg, how about you? Do you put a heading on your notes when you're taking notes in class? Okay. So 3 yeses, 2 nos, and Bailey. So then during the lecture, do you highlight or underline important information? And I do understand what Bailey's saying because I do the same thing. I take notes in class and then I go back later and take more notes. So do you highlight or underline important information? Isaiah is a yes. Amanda is a yes. So Alex is a yes.
Bailey's a maybe.
Yep. I get that too. I get that too, because sometimes you'll highlight it afterwards when you're redoing the notes. I get it. I do get it. It's just not making this particular exercise easy. So what about Greg? Greg, do you highlight or underline things while you're taking notes in class? So everybody was a yes on that, which is pretty cool. So the final question for this part is, during the lecture, while you're in class, do you ask questions, yes or no? All right, I only had 2 responses so far. Okay, so Isaiah's a sometimes. So I'll add you to our maybe.
But he says scared to sometimes.
I know, I see that. Greg, do you ask questions during class? Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, Greg. I feel like you're the kind of person that, if you have a question, you're going to ask it. So that's interesting because we really, and Isaiah, I'm going to count you as a no. Bailey, I'm counting you as a no, even though I know it can be situational. Only 2 people said yes to that one. Now, let me ask you a question that's not on this, but are you more likely to ask for help outside of class? Yes or no?
Yes.
Like send an email or something like that.
or go to tutoring.
Just remember, guys, you need to be able to ask for help so that you can, make sure that everything's clear when you're trying to work on something. So I do understand if you're hesitant to ask in class. Yeah, but exactly, Ellen, you wait till not during class when everybody else is there. That's understandable. I mean, that's okay. As long as when you do have questions, you do at some point ask, whether it's in front of the class or after the class or via email. So the last one is after class, or as they say, after lecture. Do you review your notes afterwards for at least 10 minutes? Yes or no? Uh-oh. I'm not talking to you, Bailey. I'm just not talking. Not happening. Greg, yes or no? Do you review your notes after class?
It depends, because like say like I'm studying for something, yeah, or if I know there's a test coming, yeah, but if not, it's like I'll look at it again, then be like, all right,
So it's not like you do it every class period.
yeah, nah.
I gotcha. So technically you're a no, but I understand the situation. All right, final. Do you ask for clarification if, oh wait, no, what does this exactly mean? Clarified, difficult to read or confusing notes. Well, I guess that asks the question, do you sometimes have a hard time reading your own notes after class? Yes or no?
Yes. Oh.
So technically, I think the answer to that is a yes in terms of the context of the question, Devon, but the way I asked it, it's a no.
Hey, Lisa,
Yes.
if I could just interrupt for a moment. I just want to circle back to that, the hesitancy of asking questions during class.
Sure.
And I alluded to that the other day when I was chatting with you guys before. But a lot of times students just assume that they're the only ones in that entire class, whether in person or online, that if a question arises to you and the information isn't crystal clear to you, it's only as clear as mud, and you're making the assumption that everybody else in that class got it, like they made that connection, and the likelihood of that happening is not very. So many more people of your peers are likely to have those same kind of questions, and I strongly encourage you to get in the habit early on to just raise your hand or just say, could you repeat that, or could you clarify that, so that the instructor could pause what they're talking about and just tweak it ever so slightly or however much you need to for you to gain a clear understanding of that material, because ultimately that's what learning is. You need to, when you think about how you learn to operate a computer, there was a lot of trial and error, right? So give yourself some permission to reach out and just seek the answers to the questions that you have, because I guarantee you that other people will join in that conversation to gain further clarification. It's kind of, again, it's a little off, could be it's scary to be that person to raise your hand or to ask those questions, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll be with it, and I guarantee you your peers are going to kind of follow your lead, and it'll make for a much more interactive communication in your classroom lectures. So sorry.
So I wanted to actually, now that you've given that little piece of information, I ran into one of our former students at ShopRite this weekend, and we were talking about, college. Believe it or not, we were talking about expectations of college and, students understanding, what's expected of college, because we were talking about my dissertation. But in the end, what he said to me, and I found this very interesting, is that some students assume that nobody else knows what's going on either, so they don't ask questions because at least they're in the same group that nobody understands, and there's some kind of comfortability in being in a group, whether you understand it or not. So if the rest of the class doesn't understand and you don't understand, then he said students will feel better about not understanding because there's that comfort of being in a group of people that don't understand, so they're not the only one. So I just thought that was an interesting take that I'd never thought about, because I think we address this kind of question, Rose and I and Tiffany, we talk about that a lot, ask for help, ask for help, ask for help. But when it's a situation where nobody knows what's going on or understands what's happening, nobody asks for help, it's because everybody agrees they're kind of on the same level. So let's look back over your responses now, because it says at the bottom of this, right?
Well,
The more
Lisa,
yes
before
answers.
you go on, let me
Oh,
just
sorry,
add.
go ahead.
Yeah, just let me add one more thing. The students have to also realize and review their syllabus, because in many classes, participation is, a percentage of their grade. And if if participation is a percentage of your grade, whether it's an online class or in person, and you're never asking any questions or offering up a response, then you're earning 0 points. And usually it's maybe 10% of your grade. But if you're going to throw away 10% of your grade out of fear, or just not knowing what to ask, or just not having the courage to, ask a question, then you're already starting at a 90%. So you're at a B+, while everybody else in the class who's, participating is starting at that A. And I see a comment in the chat about asking a dumb question. It's only a dumb question when you don't know the answer to it. Like, you have to learn, and your professor will let you know if you're on track or off track with the direction of your thinking with your question. So I'd rather ask the question, because obviously I think in one way that may be correct. So when your professor lets you know, nope, that is completely off track, you need to be thinking like this, then they're correcting you before you get to a quiz or a test, and you actually understand or have a better understanding of that content. So even if you think it might be a dumb question, you'd rather have the right answer to the question that you're asking rather than not know. Go ahead, Devin, I see your hand up.
So I've actually been in a class where it's like a smaller class where like the students felt kind of solidarity and not knowing what was going on, and where we all felt a little intimidated about speaking up because we were intimidated by the professor. So we all just kind of would meet up after class and go, do you understand anything that's happening? No? Cool, me either. Let's just do our best.
Yes, that's exactly it.
and we just sat with that feeling. We didn't raise our hand during classes. We didn't really do anything with that feeling. And by the time we got a quiz, and professor graded them in class, handed them back out and said, you guys, everybody bombed this. What's happening? They actually addressed the class saying like, what's going on? Is there something that needs to change? Is there something I can do differently? And so before you get to that point of, everything feeling like I have no clue what's going on, I'm in over my head, I feel like I've missed so much, that you know, asking for help now wouldn't even make a difference. You know, it's easy to get to that point, and you know, it's easy for a lot of students to get to that point and just kind of get roped into that feeling and sit in it. But that's why it's important to kind of get comfortable with establishing a back and forth in the beginning, so you are more comfortable with asking questions and you can let the professor know when, you know, something just really is not working. You know, if, you know, a crucial element of the class you don't understand at all, if you say like, can you please explain this differently? Another student may chime in and say, yeah, I don't understand that either. Then that could change the entire direction that the class is going to take. Like if me and the other students who, you know, just felt like, I don't know what to do, let's just go home and make the best of it, had, you know, spoken up earlier, things could have gone much better.
And Devin, you are on to something too. If there are more than one of you, whether it's another EOF student that's in your class or a student that, you know, you might study with or exchange notes with, you can tag team questions, you know, break the question down so you're not asking all, you know, or trying to just figure it all out on your own. You know, if I take a piece and Devin takes a piece and we both ask the question, then we're both getting the full scope of the answer. So you can, you know, be a little strategic in that way too. So that way it kind of eases you in and you're a little bit more comfortable. And believe me, there's not a professor on a college campus, probably in the nation, that wants to fail their entire class or wants to give a quiz or exam and want to see their class fail. No professor wants to see their class fail because they've taken the time to lecture, share information, give examples. So again, like Devin said, the whole idea of, okay, well, what can I do as a professor to make sure that you're better understanding the material is important, but they don't know if you don't let them know that you don't understand.
Okay, so I put everybody's results in the chat. And Devin, if you want to explain a little bit what the yeses mean for this particular exercise.
Okay. So the more yes answers you have, the better you are at taking notes. Consider the three time categories for note taking. Are your answers clustered in one time? If so, consider changing your note taking and study habits to get the most information out of the class.
That's it.
Okay. So who here is surprised by their results? Okay, Amanda, you said you are surprised by your results?
Yeah, I'm not really a good, well, at least I didn't think I was a good note taker, but I got a lot of yeses.
What did you get the most yeses for? Which category? Do you know?
I don't
I just
remember.
put that in chat. I just put it in chat for you.
Yeah. I don't remember which one I put no for, but I think I got 7 yeses and 1 no.
Yeah, your no came in during the post lecture.
Okay, yeah.
For the review for 10 minutes. That was
Oh,
your
yeah.
no.
Yeah, I usually don't do that.
Okay. So do you think that reviewing for 10 minutes is something that you're likely to change, or are you comfortable with how you take notes and study now?
I guess I'm comfortable.
Okay. anybody else want to talk about how they feel about their results?
Greg was probably the most balanced. He had half or 2 yeses and 1 no for each category. And for post-lecture, where there were only 2 questions, he had 1 no and a yes. So he was kind of the most balanced of everybody. Does that surprise you, Greg?
Nah, it doesn't. It doesn't like. I kind of expected it, honestly, or I expected a few more yeses, but I was like, oh, a few of them were maybes, so considered no's. So
Right. Absolutely. And Bailey, of course, had the most maybes of everybody. But she did have some yeses in there, which is awesome. And the majority of your yeses, like your confirmed yeses, I think, Bailey, were in the pre-lecture. And Ellen, you seem to be taking the most notes and really paying attention to things mostly when you're in class. And that kind of makes sense for you, because I know you said that being in class, like physically in class, makes a difference for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's why I wasn't really surprised. I'm like, I knew that.
Yeah, it totally made sense for you, for sure. Actually, Alex, you were really balanced too. You had 2 yeses and a no for pre-lecture, 2 yeses and a no for during lecture, and a yes and a no for post-lecture. So it was very similar to Greg's results, even though you had your yeses and nos in different places.
And then just some resources here for good notes. Blog, RMIT University Training, Vanderbilt University, Skip Downing on course textbooks. I believe that's the last slide.
Does anybody have any questions for Devon about note taking and about, reading to comprehend and reading to understand? Do you have any questions for him? I'm going to stop the recording now, though.